Who wanted Charlie Kirk dead? Why here, why now? And why in such a brutal, almost theatrical way? Charlie Kirk was a man who built a name for himself in the world of politics and media, a sharp voice, a polarizing figure, someone who inspired fierce loyalty from his followers and equal fury from his critics. But what does it take to transform public controversy into private vengeance? Was this the work of a political enemy determined to silence him? Or something more personal, buried deep in the shadows of his private life? Was his death a message, carefully staged to shock, terrify, and warn others? Who gained from the spectacle of his downfall? Did the killer want the world to watch, to speculate, to feed on the chaos left in the wake of his absence? And yet, beneath the headlines, the outrage, the conspiracy theories, what kind of man was Charlie Kirk really? Was he the larger-than-life persona people saw on stage and screens? Or was there another story, hidden in the quieter corners of his life? Friends, rivals, family. Who knew him best, and who might have wanted him gone the most? The answers lie not just in the crime scene, but in the life he lived leading up to that final, violent act. A life filled with ambition, power, and controversy, now ending in a murder that seems as much about symbolism as blood. So the question remains, was Charlie Kirk's death the climax of a political war, a personal betrayal, or something even darker? Let's find out. September 10th, 2025. A warm evening in Utah, when thousands gather at Utah Valley University. Among them, one man steps forward, Charlie Kirk. Polished, fiery, unapologetic. He begins to speak, his voice echoing over the crowd. A truth, a warning, perhaps even a confession. But behind the scenes, unseen, something dark stirs. A rooftop, a rifle, shadows, a moment where seconds stretch into eternity. Suddenly a shot, time fractures, gasps, chaos, a movement that changes everything. Charlie Kirk falls. The stage goes silent. DNA evidence. A suspect emerges. A motive unknown. And the questions begin. Who wanted him dead? Why now? And how had his life forced him to this edge, before this final act? This is not the beginning. But in every ending, there is a beginning. In the life behind the man. Childhood, belief, ambition, enemies. Stay with me. Because to understand what happened to Charlie Kirk, we must first understand how he became someone worth killing. The night is split in two, before the sound and after. A single crack, sharp and merciless, cuts through the air. The crowd gasps. Chaos erupts. The man who once commanded thousands with his voice now lies motionless in silence. Charlie Kirk is gone. The air reeks of gunpowder, sweat, and fear. Sirens wail in the distance, growing louder, closing in. Yellow tape stretches across the campus entrance like a warning banner. Cameras flash. Reporters whisper. Police swarm. But at the center of it all, one question lingers, burning hotter than the lights overhead. Who wanted Charlie Kirk dead? Why here, why now, and why in such a brutal, almost theatrical way? He had power. He had enemies. He had influence that cut deep into the fabric of America. But no one thought it would end like this, on a stage, in front of witnesses, with a message left in violence. Was it political enemies? Bitter rivals? Betrayed allies? Or someone who knew him more intimately than the public ever would? To understand the answers, we cannot remain at this scene, because this, though it feels like the end, is only the beginning. To understand Charlie Kirk's death, we must first understand his life, the boy he was, the man he became, and the choices that made him a lightning rod for love and for hate, because in every ending there is a beginning. Charlie Kirk was born on October 14th, 1993, in the suburbs of Illinois, a quiet town, a quiet street, but within those walls was a boy who would not stay quiet for long. While other kids played ball and dreamed of Saturday mornings, Charlie dreamed bigger. He was restless, determined, convinced that his voice could shape the world. Even then, some say, he had a hunger for influence, something inside that refused to let him fade into the background. Teachers remembered him as sharp, opinionated, unwilling to back down from a debate. But what began as schoolyard arguments would grow into something far greater. something that would one day paint a target on his back. In his teenage years, while most were caught in the rhythm of adolescence, Charlie's eyes were fixed on something larger. Politics, power, influence. He read voraciously, studied arguments, memorized statistics. His friends would joke, sometimes admiring, sometimes uneasy, that he was preparing for a stage long before he ever stepped onto one. And yet, even then, there were whispers. Some admired his boldness. Others questioned it. Some believed he was destined for greatness. Others felt he was walking into danger. Because ambition, when carried so publicly, does more than inspire, it provokes. By the time Charlie was a young man, the seeds had been planted. His voice wasn't just loud, it was polarizing. He inspired loyalty in some and fury in others. Every speech, every stance, every argument carved a deeper line between those who stood with him and those who stood against him. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that each line drawn would one day circle back. Each enemy made in youth would not simply vanish. Some would wait, watch, bide their time, until the moment came to strike. And strike they would. From a small-town boy to a voice that stirred a nation, Charlie Kirk's journey had only just begun. But the same ambition that lifted him into the spotlight also painted a bullseye on his chest. Because every rise has its cost. And for Charlie Kirk, the cost would be higher than anyone could imagine. The question was not if his choices would catch up to him, but when. By 2012, at just 18 years old, Charlie Kirk had already stepped beyond the confines of high school debate clubs and local gatherings. In a world where most of his peers were still finding their place, Charlie founded Turning Point USA. A modest start, just a handful of students, a borrowed microphone, and a message that conservative values could and should dominate America's campuses. Few noticed at first, but what starts small does not always stay small. The seeds of something much larger were planted, and in only a matter of years, they would spread across the nation like wildfire. Charlie wasn't just another activist. He had something others lacked: relentless energy, a sharp tongue, and a gift for turning every encounter into a moment of performance. He was provocative, unapologetic, unafraid of confrontation. On college campuses, he thrived on conflict, almost inviting it. The cheers of supporters and the jeers of critics became part of the same soundtrack. To Charlie, both meant the same thing: attention. And attention is power. With every speech, every viral video, every campus confrontation, his name grew. Supporters saw him as a truth-teller, someone who said what others feared to say. Detractors called him reckless, inflammatory, even dangerous. He didn't just inspire, he divided. And division is power, if you know how to wield it. But division also creates enemies, and enemies have long memories. As Turning Point USA grew, so did Charlie's reach. He wasn't just a student activist anymore. He was shaking hands with lawmakers, appearing on national television, advising political leaders. His events grew from classrooms to auditoriums, from dozens of students to thousands of attendees. For a young man barely in his 20s, the ascent was dizzying. To his admirers, he was a prodigy. To his critics, a menace. To those who watched quietly from the sidelines, he was a growing threat. And threats, eventually, must be dealt with. Every rise carved shadows. Behind the applause, behind the headlines, there were whispers, allegations. Old allies turned skeptics, rivals waiting for him to stumble. In private, he faced mounting threats, anonymous letters, strange phone calls at midnight, protesters who weren't just loud, but violent. Security increased. The shadows drew closer. He brushed it off, laughed it away. To the public, Charlie was unshakable. But privately he knew. He had climbed quickly, maybe too quickly, and every step higher left him more exposed. The rise of Charlie Kirk was meteoric, undeniable. But meteors don't rise forever. They burn, they blaze, and sometimes they fall. Before the final night, before the gunshot, before the chaos in Utah, there were signs. Strange encounters, dangerous warnings, close calls that should have been impossible to ignore. This was not the beginning of his end, but the first shadows of danger. Success does not come without a cost. For Charlie Kirk, That cost began as whispers. Anonymous notes slipped under office doors. Late-night emails filled with venom. Strange men loitering near his events, faces he didn't recognize, yet somehow familiar. He was used to hecklers. He thrived on confrontation. But this was different. These weren't students with signs, or critics with loud voices. These were shadows. Quiet, persistent, and closer than he realized. By now, Charlie wasn't just an activist. He was a symbol. And symbols attract both worshippers and enemies. His fiery speeches on college campuses had sparked outrage from student groups. His television appearances drew the fury of political rivals. Even within conservative circles, whispers spread. Some admired his rapid rise, others envied it. Politics, after all, is not about loyalty. It is about survival. And Charlie Kirk was becoming too big, too fast. The first incident came in late 2018. A crowded event in Arizona. The atmosphere charged, the room thick with tension. Suddenly, shouting, chaos. A scuffle near the front row. Security swarmed. They found a man with a concealed weapon, sitting just 3 rows from the stage. The headline spun it as another protest gone too far. Charlie brushed it off. But behind closed doors, his team began to whisper. This wasn't an accident. Weeks later, a new pattern began. The phone calls. Always at night. Always from numbers that didn't exist. When answered, there was no voice, only static. Sometimes a faint breathing. Other times, a distorted whisper. Soon. He stopped answering. But the calls didn't stop. They followed him, city to city, hotel to hotel, as though someone, or something, was tracking his every move. Then came the letters. Not one, not two, but dozens. Some handwritten, some typed, all delivered with chilling precision. We see you. This will end. Tick, tick, tick. His security detail doubled. Event venues were swept. Yet the threats continued. Each one sharper, closer, more personal. Whoever was behind them wasn't just trying to scare him. They were rehearsing. Charlie Kirk's rise was unstoppable. But now, for the first time, cracks appeared. The threats were no longer background noise. They were real, physical, undeniable. And still, he pressed forward. More speeches. More appearances. More enemies. He was warned to slow down, to step back, to take the danger seriously. But Charlie never slowed. He couldn't. His career was climbing, his influence growing, his name echoing across the nation. Until one night in Utah, when the whispers became screams. It was supposed to be just another event, a routine stop in Utah. A speech, a crowd, applause, and then the next city. Charlie had done it hundreds of times before. But as the plane touched down in Salt Lake City, something felt off. The air was heavy, thicker than usual. His team noticed the silence in the terminal. The way security guards scanned the crowd with unease. The way strangers' eyes lingered just a second too long. Even Charlie, ever confident, couldn't shake the feeling that this night would be different. He checked into a modest hotel downtown. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy. Yet even here, the tension followed. A call came to the front desk asking for his room number. The clerk refused. Minutes later, another call. This time, a different voice. Security brushed it off as a prank. But the night clerk swore the caller's tone wasn't playful. It was cold, deliberate, as if the person on the other end already knew the answer. The event itself drew hundreds. A mix of loyal supporters, fierce critics, and those simply curious to see the man who had become a lightning rod for controversy. The auditorium was buzzing with energy, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of hostility, like a storm waiting to break. Security swept the venue twice. Nothing unusual. At least, nothing they could see. Charlie took the stage with his trademark confidence. The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Almost safe. Almost. But midway through the speech, unease rippled across the room. Security caught sight of a man lingering near the exit, shifting nervously, muttering to himself. Another, seated in the balcony, never clapped, never moved, just stared, unblinking. Charlie pressed on. raising his voice to drown out the tension. The crowd leaned forward, caught between his words and the strange energy thickening around them. Something was building. And then it happened. A sound cracked through the air, sharp, deafening. For a split second, no one moved. No one breathed. The crowd froze in suspended silence. Then chaos. Screams. Panic. Security lunged forward. People ducked, stumbled, trampled each other as the auditorium erupted into terror. On stage, Charlie Kirk staggered, his eyes wide, mouth open as if to speak. A crimson stain blossomed across his shirt. His legs buckled. The microphone screeched as it hit the floor. The shooter vanished into the panic. Some swore they saw a man slip through the exit. Others swore it came from the balcony. No two stories matched. Within minutes, police flooded the building, locking down streets, interrogating witnesses. But the one question no one could answer, the one question that would haunt investigators, supporters, and critics alike, was simple. Who pulled the trigger and why? The life of Charlie Kirk had ended in a single violent moment, but the mystery had only just begun. Theories multiplied. Suspects emerged, each one with motive, each one with secrets. And as investigators dug deeper, what they uncovered was darker than anyone expected. This wasn't just about politics. It wasn't just about power. It was about something far more dangerous, something hidden, something worth killing for. In the immediate aftermath, the scene was pandemonium. Witnesses screamed. Phones shook as they recorded. Security forces scrambled. Some claimed they saw the shooter in a hood. Others swore it came from the balcony. The truth was buried under chaos. And investigators faced their first challenge. Too many accounts. Too many stories. No clear answers. But one fact was undeniable. Someone had gotten close enough to end Charlie Kirk's life. And whoever that person was had vanished into the night. Investigators first turned to the obvious suspects, political rivals. Charlie Kirk's meteoric rise had made him enemies, not only on the left, but within his own party. One name surfaced quickly, a seasoned political strategist who had publicly clashed with Charlie. He accused Kirk of stealing his spotlight, of hijacking a movement he claimed to have built. The bitterness was well documented. Did ambition curdle into murder? But investigators couldn't ignore another possibility. A radical protester who had followed Charlie from campus to campus, rally to rally. This wasn't just opposition. It was obsession. The protester's face appeared at nearly every major event, sometimes screaming in the crowd, other times silent, watching. And on the night in Utah, witnesses swore they saw him again. Yet sometimes the most dangerous enemies are not outside, but within. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered fractures inside Charlie's own organization. Former staffers spoke of tension, jealousy, even betrayal. One ex-aide claimed Charlie took credit for work he didn't do. Another whispered about money, donations unaccounted for, funds that vanished without explanation. Could one of his own have turned on him? But there was one suspect stranger than all the rest. A man who had no clear motive, no known connection to Charlie Kirk. He appeared in security footage from the Utah event, sitting silently in the back row. He didn't clap, didn't move, didn't even flinch when the gunshot rang out. While everyone else dove for cover, he simply walked out. The cameras caught his face only once, and when investigators ran it through databases, no match was found. It was as if the man didn't exist. With each lead came contradictions. Witnesses swore the shooter was tall, others short. Some said he had a beard, others clean-shaven. Theories piled up: lone wolf, political hit job, personal vendetta. But for investigators, one truth became clear. This wasn't random. This was calculated. The letters, the calls, the shadows, they had all been building toward this. And somewhere, buried in the chaos, was the answer. For suspects, for possible motives, each as compelling as the next. But which one pulled the trigger? The investigation had only just begun, and as detectives peeled back the layers, they stumbled onto something even darker. An underground network, a hidden connection that tied these suspects together in ways no one expected. And that connection would change everything. Weeks into the investigation, detectives found themselves drowning in dead ends. Every suspect looked guilty. Every alibi had cracks. But the pieces wouldn't fit. Until one night, buried in a stack of overlooked evidence, a clue surfaced. A bank record. A transfer of funds. Untraceable at first, but then linked to an offshore account. And from that account a trail that connected not one, not two, but all four primary suspects. Different backgrounds, different motives, different stories, yet all touched by the same hidden hand. The money trail led to more than just shady finances. It revealed an underground web of influence, a hidden circle of operatives who seemed to move silently across political and activist landscapes. They weren't tied to one ideology, not left, not right, something else entirely. And within this circle, whispers of a name surfaced. A code name. The Architect. Who or what was the Architect? Some investigators believed it was a single figure, a shadowy mastermind pulling strings behind the scenes. Others argued it was a collective, a faceless syndicate moving like one organism. But one fact stood out. Every suspect in Charlie Kirk's case had, at some point, received money or instruction that traced back to this mysterious name. Did they even know they were connected? Or were they just pawns, unknowingly serving a larger game? The Architect wasn't just tied to Charlie Kirk. As detectives dug deeper, they found eerie similarities in other high-profile cases, unsolved threats, sudden scandals, inexplicable downfalls. A journalist silenced overseas. A whistleblower who vanished without a trace. A politician whose career imploded overnight. Different names, different faces, but the same fingerprints, financial, digital, circumstantial, all leading back to the Architect. The investigation into Charlie Kirk's murder had begun with a single gunshot in Utah, but now it pointed toward something far larger, far darker. A hidden network, a faceless mastermind, a trail of blood and secrets stretching across borders. And yet, for all the connections, all the evidence, one question loomed larger than all the rest. Was Charlie Kirk targeted because of who he was, or because of what he had discovered? In the last 6 months of his life, those closest to Charlie noticed something different. He was distracted, uneasy, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He began traveling in secrecy, taking trips with no public announcements, no social media posts, no press coverage, just disappearing for days at a time. When asked where he had been, his answers were vague. Meetings, he would say. Work, but the tone carried weight, as though even speaking too much out loud could put him at risk. Records show that during these quiet trips, Charlie met with people far outside his usual political orbit, bankers, cybersecurity experts, even former intelligence officers. Witnesses recalled him sitting in dimly lit cafes, leaning in close, voices hushed, sometimes heated, always tense. What was he chasing? What secret weighed so heavily on his shoulders? Investigators would later uncover what they believed to be Charlie's secret project, a file. Its contents were never fully revealed. Some say it was a dossier on corruption, names, dates, evidence. Others claim it tied powerful figures across industries into one hidden network. But the file went missing the night of his murder. To this day, it has never been found. Friends later admitted they'd begged him to slow down, to stop digging, to let it go. But Charlie refused. He believed he was close, too close to stop. One confidant recalled his chilling words, "If something happens to me, you'll know why." In his final days, Charlie Kirk moved like a man with a clock ticking above his head. His schedule grew erratic. He skipped public events without explanation. His inner circle described him as focused, but haunted. And then silence. Calls unanswered. Meetings canceled. Social feeds frozen. Until finally his body was found. But here's the question investigators still ask. Did his killer silence him because of who he was, or because of what he had uncovered? As word of Charlie Kirk's death spread, investigators wasted no time. They pulled in everyone close to him, friends, rivals, business associates. Each interview began the same way, polite, measured, cooperative. But it didn't take long before cracks began to show. One figure in particular, a longtime ally of Charlie's, insisted he had nothing to hide. He claimed to have been out of state at the time of the murder, attending a fundraiser. But the fundraiser's guest list told a different story. His name wasn't there. Witnesses couldn't place him. When pressed, he grew defensive. His voice cracked. His story shifted. And in that moment, detectives knew he was lying about something. Then there was the rival, the one who had publicly sparred with Charlie for years. He swore he had no reason to want Kirk dead, that their rivalry was just politics. Yet a week before the murder, security footage caught him pacing outside Charlie's office building in the dead of night. When asked why he was there, his answer was chillingly simple. I can't remember. A third suspect, perhaps the most unnerving of all, refused to speak at all. Not a word. Lawyers sat beside them, advising silence. Every question met with a blank stare. But silence, too, can be deafening. Detectives uncovered phone records tying this figure to late-night calls made to an unknown number, the same night Charlie Kirk vanished. Calls that lasted exactly 42 seconds each, repeated over and over. Individually, their lies could be dismissed. But together, they formed a pattern, a tapestry of contradictions that pointed toward something deliberate. No one's story matched. Every timeline was fractured. Each motive, petty or political, could plausibly tie back to the night of the murder. But the more investigators pulled on the threads, the more they all seemed to lead back to the same hidden hand. The architect. On the night of his death, Charlie Kirk was seen leaving a downtown hotel just after 9 p.m. Witnesses say he was alone. No security. No staff trailing behind. Just Charlie, clutching a folder under his arm, walking briskly toward a black SUV waiting outside. That was the last time he was seen alive in public. At 9:15 p.m., the SUV left the city. Traffic cameras placed it heading west along a near-empty stretch of road. But between 9:30 and 10 p.m., the vehicle disappeared. No cameras caught its path. No witnesses reported seeing it. It was as if the SUV had vanished into thin air. And when it reappeared at 10:05 p.m., something was different. The driver's silhouette had changed. At 10:12 p.m., Charlie made his final phone call. The recipient, unknown. The number, untraceable. The call lasted exactly 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Investigators described his voice as hurried, anxious, pleading even. Then silence. At approximately 10:30 p.m., a nearby resident reported hearing 3 sharp cracks echoing through the night. Gunfire. The sound carried across the canyon, bouncing through the dark. Yet no one called police until hours later. Why? Fear, confusion, or deliberate silence. His body was discovered just before dawn, slumped in the back seat of the SUV, hidden beneath a thin blanket. The folder he had carried? Gone. The phone? Smashed beyond recovery. The official report listed the cause of death as gunshot wounds. But to those who examined the scene, it was clear. This was more than a killing. It was a message. 6 hours. That's all it took for Charlie Kirk to vanish from a hotel lobby into the shadows of history. 6 hours filled with unanswered calls, vanishing vehicles, and whispers of a file that no one has seen since. But one question cuts deeper than all the others. Was this the act of a single assassin, or the orchestrated strike of something much larger? Something still moving in the dark? In the days that followed, headlines blazed with shock. Supporters mourned. Critics speculated. Investigators scrambled. But the deeper the public dug, the murkier it all became. There was no clear suspect. No smoking gun. No recovered file. Just silence, and the shadow of something that refused to reveal itself. Charlie Kirk's death didn't just end a life. It sent shockwaves through politics, media, and society itself. Rumors spread of what he might have uncovered. A conspiracy reaching beyond borders. A secret so dangerous that those in power would do anything to keep it hidden. And with every year that passes, the questions only grow louder. To some, Kirk remains a controversial figure. To others, a martyr who died chasing truths no one else dared to touch. His story became more than a tragedy. It became a cautionary tale. A reminder of the dangers faced by those who push too far, too fast, into the shadows where power hides, a reminder that truth is never safe. And yet, the story resists an ending. Who pulled the trigger that night? Who ordered it? Where is the missing file? Was Charlie Kirk silenced for what he knew, or for what he was about to discover? Until those answers emerge, his story remains unfinished. A puzzle with missing pieces. A crime that whispers in the dark. In the end, we are left with haunting echoes, the silence of unanswered calls, the vanishing SUV, the file that may never surface. The truth is still out there, waiting, watching, hidden in plain sight. And as long as it remains buried, one question will haunt us forever. Who really killed Charlie Kirk? Thank you for staying with me through this journey into one of the darkest and most mysterious cases we've ever explored. If you made it this far, you're the reason True Crime Arena exists, a place where we seek truth, no matter how unsettling. If you found this story gripping, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. Every click helps us keep uncovering the stories that others won't tell. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and welcome to the True Crime Arena.